Who in the world am I? The great puzzle. And there's no use in going back to yesterday, because I tell you, I was a different person then. Hello, fellow griever, and welcome back to Down the Rabbit Hole and a special space within the leftover pieces. I'm Melissa, your host, and today's episode is deeply personal to me. It's one that I've wanted to do for a while. I want to be able to tell you what I do, but I also want to be able to tell you, more importantly, why I do it. What brought me here, what keeps me here, and how I hope to keep showing up for you, for all of us that are walking this impossible road of life after suicide loss. So I know that many of you may have been with me for a while, and you may know all or parts of my lost story, but I also know some of you may be starting right here for the first time. And so I want to take a minute and tell you what called me to this place, what called me to be a podcast host and start the Leftover Pieces back in 2020. In August of 2016, August 7th of 2016, my son Alex, who was 21 years old and in college with the world by the tail, suddenly died by suicide. So that is always my first identity here, is a grieving mother, someone who is not just an author, a speaker, a podcast coach, a Reiki master, all of the things that have come to follow. First and foremost, I'm a grieving mom. The moment that Alex died, my life, myself, changed forever. My life changed, and there isn't any going back. I had to learn how to walk forward with this. I had to learn how to stand up first. At first, all I wanted to do was survive, and that's all I did for quite a while. For about 3.5 years, 3 years, I said, before the podcast became an idea. And then, if you know my story at all, which there's more of it in more places if you're interested in reading or hearing about it. But at about right after the 3-year mark, I decided that I could start the podcast that I couldn't find. That was what I wanted. I was taking in audio material, podcasts and audiobooks as a way to soak in information about suicide loss, ways to find comfort, ways to find out how to try to survive, ways to find tools. And audio was so much better for me than the written word at that time. And yet I couldn't find a podcast that really resonated with where I was at in my specific circumstance. And so at first, that's all I wanted to do was create the podcasts I couldn't find. And in the midst of, from the time it became an idea to the time I started it in late 2020, I did have a minor stroke. That's a part of my story because my body was keeping the score. And I did have to take a pause, and I really dug into my trauma healing at that point. And I won't digress and go down that path at this point. I won't go down an extra path in the rabbit hole. But for me, the Leftover Pieces Suicide Loss Conversations podcast was a seed. I may not have realized it at the time because in the beginning, all I wanted to do was create the podcast. And I remember saying specifically, if it helps just one person, that's enough. And don't get me wrong, it was helping me too. I knew that. Pretty quickly, I knew that this was as much for me as it was for anybody else, but I wanted to just be able to somehow help one other person. And so for me, the podcast was a seed, and it was born out of a need for connection and understanding and to find community amongst this lonely, wretched silence. Everything else I do today that started with the community in 2021. Everything else, like the coaching, the writing, the groups, the retreats, the books, all of it grew organically out of those initial conversations. My heart followed the grief needs that were being voiced. I didn't set out to build a business. That was never even in my mind. I just knew I couldn't be the only one searching for connection in the dark. So I created the podcast, a place where real conversations about suicide loss could live. And then something happened. People found it. People responded. And in the conversations that I was having, I heard the same longings that I had for support, for meaning, for healing, that didn't come from some checklist. I found that most suicide loss grievers and absolutely moms, because that's the space that I'm in, had common needs. Yes, we have a lot of different ones, but I found that we had common needs. We had the needs for resources at the time of loss and beyond, because we know they're missing in both spaces. We have a deep-seated need for connected community that understands what we're going through. And most of us also have a deep need for legacy, so that our loved one is not forgot. And most of what I do fits inside of that basic idea that came fairly early on into doing the podcast. So what I did was I kept listening. Yes, I talked, but I listened more. And what came next? All of those things that I talked about before, all of that grew from the space in my heart and the needs that I was seeing. The way I see myself in this journey that I'm on is not somebody to fix things or provide solutions for others. And don't get me wrong, I am trying to provide pathways and I'm trying to provide empowerment. But I see myself as a fellow traveler. I see myself as somebody on this journey with you. And if I can share what I've learned and what I have found out and what I have come to know, then maybe it can help you. And that's what guides me in all of the work that I do. I try to offer permission, not prescriptions. And what I offer most of all is just presence. I come from a space of lived experience. I authentically, from my heart, want to provide ways forward. I want to provide glimmers of hope, and I want to provide a hand in the dark. There are many, many other grief professionals out there, some in the suicide loss space and some just in the grief space. And I have deep, deep respect for the professionals doing this work alongside me. Many of them I know, many of them I have had on the podcast and or worked in capacities with them. And while there are common threads to what many of us do, my personal approach is shaped by my own journey as a grieving mom and as an expert in the grief field who has now learned different ways to help us get through this and to get up and to grow forward. Right now I'm thinking about a quote from C.S. Lewis that says, "You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending." And that's a really good guiding principle, I think. So now, as I continue to grow, as I continue to respond to what I see other grievers need, what I do doesn't feel at all like a business, and I definitely don't feel like there's a business plan at play here. Everything has come from these podcast conversations. Everything comes from my heart, from what other grieving moms and survivors have told me they wished existed, and most definitely from what I wished existed and couldn't find. And the growth that I have seen in moms, even moms that are early on, and other fellow grievers that actually find places to do these things, to find resources and community and spaces that offer healing and support. What I have seen shows that it matters. It shows that it makes a difference in how they move forward and how quickly they can find hope and things like that. Everything I create begins with these conversations, as I just said a minute ago. And when someone tells me they wish there was a group like this or a book like that, I listen. And that's how it's all grown. Not from some grand plan, but from my heart and from needs. And maybe that's not something somebody should admit. Maybe I should be on here talking about how I grew my business or am growing my business intentionally with some grand master plan. And don't get me wrong, I now believe that we have some grand master plan that's beyond our control. And that's not a religious belief. I'm not here to discuss those things. But for me, that's a soul purpose belief. That's a universal belief. That's a belief that has come from connection to my child and 8.5+ years of living and walking this path every day. That's where it comes from. And I've just decided not to be ashamed that I have built all of this organically from my heart. I'm not ashamed that I haven't done it in a more traditional model. I'm actually proud of that. So as I get ready to wrap up today, I am going to end by doing something I don't do very often. I'm not good at it, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't do it. And so I'm challenging myself and I'm being brave. And I want to say to you today that if this podcast or any part of the leftover pieces has given you something of value, I'd be truly honored if you'd consider supporting the work that I do. There's a support the podcast button now on my website, right as you log on, right under the introduction video. And every single bit helps. This is how I'm able to continue to show up and create without ads or distractions or noise, with just honest conversations, real heart, and the hope for healing. Most of all, what I want to do is thank you for being here, for letting me share even just a little part of my journey with you. Because you and your journey matter to me. Your grief matters, your story matters, your loved one matters. And I promise I'll keep showing up for you, for Alex, and for all the loved ones that we've lost and miss every single day. I'm so grateful for you, griever. Thank you for being a listener, and thank you for showing up for me, but also thank you for showing up for yourself. Please reach out if you need anything. I'm always here. And until next time, talk soon. So that's all I have for today, fellow griever. And with one final word from Alice, I will leave us with how puzzling all these changes are. I'm never sure what I'm going to be from one moment to another. Oh, that's so true, isn't it? So until next time, we'll talk soon.